Say good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about currency, and I'm really pleased that Tom from A Place in the Sun Currency is joining me today. Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm very good, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thanks. All good. So,
Good.
Tom, just tell me about yourself and what you do.
I, for my sins, have worked in the currency industry for coming up to 20 years now. I originally founded a company called Currency Index back in 2008. And then more recently, we've done a joint venture with A Place in the Sun, the well-known TV show and very recognised overseas property portal as well. And we're now officially A Place in the Sun Currency. Our whole kind of modus operandi is helping people who buy property overseas with their currency transactions, with two kind of key areas there. The first one, saving them significantly on the exchange rate. But the second part, and something that people often overlook, is the importance of the actual payments that they need to make and how that's all handled. So good service for the payment side, save the clients some money on the exchange rate side. And really enable their overseas property purchase in a nice, straightforward way without having to worry about what is, for most people, their first kind of interaction with the currency markets above and beyond getting a few euros for their holidays. So, yeah, that's kind of in short what we do. If you want anything more, I am a father of four, live in the UK. We do have an office out in Spain, so I'm often over there myself, visiting our office and our staff out there. And as you know, Alex, a keen rugby fan as well. Enjoyed very much earlier the Lions' comprehensive victory.
All right, I haven't caught up with that, but I have got tickets to go and watch the Lions in Sydney, Tom.
Well, Alex, I must tell you, I'm not sure which day that's on, but I am definitely available if you need a wingman.
I've already got a wingman. He's gonna look after me when I'm in Sydney. So,
There you go.
but yeah, next time, Tom. So, okay, so you've told me about what. I mean, I suppose the key difference here is you don't really help clients with their holiday money. It's more of if you're going to buy a property or sell a property anywhere in the world and you want to change sterling to that denomination, that's where you help. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So we don't offer any cash services at all. It's a completely different type of model. It's all about bank-to-bank transfers. And as you say, it's generally speaking, people use it for larger transactions around property purchases. But we've always been very clear we want to be able to help people with that whole process. So we'll help people with smaller payments as well. We can do it for any country around the world, apart from those that are obviously sanctioned and a bit less available for that kind of service. But obviously, a lot of that is in Europe, specifically in Spain as well. That's still for the overseas property market of Brits, that still accounts for almost 2/3 of the market. So a lot of our work is in Spain, but we have people, you mentioned Sydney just there. We have people emigrating across to Australia who we help with their currency transactions, all going the other way around the world to the US as well. So yeah, anywhere around the world we can help.
Okay, so we've got an expert here from the currency world. He's been in the industry for 20 years. And how do you make your money then? Are you sat on billions of euros or billions of dollars that you bought really cheap and you're selling them now more expensive? Tell us how it works and how much could someone save if they use you guys?
Sure. So I'll answer this last part of that question first, if you don't mind, which is to say that we do a huge amount of market research. We look at all of our competitors, be it the main banks or the other brokers that we come up against. And typically for the high street banks, so the people that the vast majority of our potential clients come across in their day-to-day lives, so the Barclays, Lloyds, NatWest of this world, we can save around 3.5% to 4% on the exchange rate.
Wow.
We know that because we regularly dip into their market and do analysis of that. On the other FX brokers, there are really kind of two specific types. The first one is what you might call an online broker. Also, this accounts for some of the challenger banks as well. So the Starling banks, Monzo banks, and things along those lines. And they offer very, very, very good exchange rates. The main reason for that is that they can they have very few overheads apart from the tech that runs their platforms. They don't have people. They don't have any of those kind of things that can cost money for a business. So they offer very good FX rates. In most cases, actually, one of the other reasons is they're loss leading on FX deliberately to build up market share in the hope of becoming a bank further down the line, at which point they actually widen their market spread and therefore you lose out a little on the exchange rate. But they offer very good exchange rates on the face of it, but obviously it's the service that they can't match that we offer, which we'll come to, I'm sure, later, but is very much a hand-holding account manager-led service, which I think is very important in this industry. But so against a company like that, we'll try and match their rates as best we can. We might end up being a little bit more expensive, but I think for the service and the peace of mind of having a person at the other end of a phone to be able to speak to, rather than an AI chatbot or something, it's invaluable. And the other kind of type of overseas broker is the same as us. And ultimately, we all buy from the same places. We all can offer the same kind of exchange rates. So it comes down to pretty much which one you'd rather deal with. And if people do want to shop around and compare people's rates, then that's fine too. We're all open to that kind of thing, and it helps you to make sure that you have the peace of mind of knowing that you're getting the best deal, but also that you've kept all of us on our toes and kept us honest from that perspective as well. So we'll always happily enter that kind of situation as well. And we make our money simply between the difference between what we buy the currency for and what we sell it to you, or not to you, but to the client for. We aren't sitting on big piles of euros or dollars that we bought at a good rate, because ultimately it's impossible to ever know what a good rate is. You'd always be speculating on that answer, and the UK FX industry is regulated and speculation is strictly prohibited. You can deal with an entirely different type of currency broker who are a speculative investment type organization, but that's not what we do. We do something called deliverable FX, and what that means is that every transaction it has a specific amount of currency that is required, and that is what we buy at the time. So we go onto our buying platform. You need 100,000 euros. We get you a price for the 100,000 euros. If you ask us to go ahead, we buy it there and then. So because that's a live transaction, we can offer a much smaller margin than a bank might, for example, which is why we can offer such a good saving. But it means that we buy to order. So every transaction is completely covered at the point of trade. Therefore, there's no speculation involved. So that adds a lot of security to our business as well. Obviously, if the market crashes, it doesn't mean we're going to go out of business, because it doesn't matter. It just means that next day we're offering much lower rates. But so we make our money on the margin in the exchange rates. We save people typically against the banks around 3 or 4%, something along those lines. And we'll try and always be competitive against any other broker. But it's all about, in those scenarios, it's all about the service.
So Tom, I mean, as a specialist company, in the FX world, a place in the sun currency can save someone, instead of them going to the high street bank, between 3 and 4%. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly right. So, average, certainly in Spain, I guess the average property purchase for the majority of our client base is probably about 150 to 200,000 euros. Something along those lines. You're talking about a saving of, £5,000-6,000 just on the exchange rate. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing, isn't it? So just about shopping around. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So definitely better to use a specialist FX company rather than a high street bank.
100% all day long.
Okay, cool. All right. Now, we act for lots of clients buying property all over Spain. We've got offices in the Costa Blanca. We've got offices in the Costa del Sol, and also Almeria. And what they ask us a lot of times is, when should they fix their rate? Okay. And we always say, speak to the FX broker about when best to fix the rate. Because as you know, in the buying process, we've got various stages. We've got, when they find a property, they have to pay a reservation fee, which could be anywhere between 3 and 20,000 euros. Then they pay, when we exchange contracts, they'll pay the balance of 10%. And then once you've paid that 10%, you've exchanged contracts, and you'll know when completion is. So when would you recommend that they fix their rate?
So there are many, many different points during your journey that you could consider fixing your rate. I've had clients in the past who've actually bought their currency before they've even been out to view because they perceived that there was some advantage to do so. The market was particularly high or something along those lines, and it suited their budget. But for me, I would always say to a client that it's worth only buying currency when you know that you definitely are going to need it. We've also had lots of clients who've secured currency and then something changes, circumstances change and they've suddenly got a big amount of euros they need to sell back to get sterling because their life's changed for whatever reason. So my recommendation would always be to buy your currency only when you need it. So when you find that property, you've got the reservation fee to pay. That's the point when I would start actually actioning a currency transaction. At that point, there is 2 or 3 different types of contract that we would explain to a client that they can take advantage of, and they serve different purposes. And for me, I think it's quite important. And whenever we speak in webinars or at seminars or big exhibitions, I will say to people, when you put an offer in and it's accepted on a property overseas, specifically obviously in Spain in this example, you know what the price of the property is going to be, but you don't know what the cost of the property is going to be because the FX rate is constantly moving. So what I personally would always suggest to a client would be at that point that you're booking your reservation fee, consider booking the FX for the entirety of your transaction. You can do what's called a spot contract, so an on-the-spot currency exchange, which is a short, quick turnaround transaction, which is designed for the actual reservation fee, maybe for that 10% deposit when it comes around a couple of weeks later. And you can book something called a forward contract, which is a mechanism of buying your currency in advance of requiring it. It requires you to know how much you need. So the completion amount for the property in this case. It requires you to know the time scale, which generally speaking, you'll have a pretty good idea of. It's going to be a couple of months, maybe as soon as 6 weeks or something. And it only requires you critically to have 10% of the sterling funds available. So you actually get to keep, once you've secured that, you know what your exchange rate is going to be, you know what the cost of that property is actually going to be, not just the price. And you can stop worrying about effects. Doesn't matter what happens to the market in the intervening period because you're all locked in and secured. And you only need 10% of the funds. So the remaining 90% for that, say, 2 or 3 month period, you can keep earning interest in whatever it is you might have it in. Or alternatively, you can, if you're releasing it from a pension or a remortgage or something like that, there's no hurry to get it all in advance. You can wait for those processes to complete. So for me, in a quick answer to the question, don't secure any currency until you know you're definitely going to need it. And then when you do know what you're going to need, I would always look at securing the whole amount so that you remove the variable and the market risk and you know what that cost of that property is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So clients contact us up front. We typically would put a power of attorney in place for them, so we can act for them when they find a property and want to sign that reservation contract, which we'd always recommend that they look at lawyer reviews before it's signed. And so what we speak to our clients right at the beginning of their journey. And we talk to them about the buying process and we talk to them about the buying costs, a general perspective. For example, Andalusia, second-hand property, if you allow 10% on top of the purchase price, you're covered. Costa Blanca, Valencian region, 13% for a second-hand property. So we'll talk to them generally, and we do send specific, we can prepare specific costs detailed about how much a certain property will cost them. So Tom, that's really quite interesting, the fact that someone could book the euros now and that's a spot contract, and then going forward they could actually book that forward contract for, if they're buying a property off plan or completion is going to be delayed for the next 3 or 4 months. So buying that now, putting 10% down now is like amazing. So if some clients are actually buying off plan, so they could fix their rate now if it's a good rate, and they've only got to pay 10%. How long can you hold on for that money for?
So with a forward contract, in theory, you can book a forward contract up to 2 years ahead. So people do sometimes use it for when you need to make stage payments on a new build or something along those lines. Generally, people don't go out that far, though. I mean, probably the longest I've seen in recent times has been up to a year. The vast majority of people are booking forwards for 2 or 3 months for that kind of standard completion period on a normal resale property. But yeah, in theory, up to 2 years, but that's very rare, because with a forward, there is one intricacy with a forward that makes quite a difference. Is if the further forward you go, the rate that you can get with your forward slightly drops off. So if you go forward a couple of months, you'll barely notice it. It might be the difference between getting, 115 and 114.80 or something like that. So very, very small. But if you go out as far as a couple of years, then you'll find that 115, for example, might be as low as 113. And actually, it still makes sense because you're protecting yourself from the variable and all the risk and all that kind of thing. But it's quite a big cost to pay, and most people are unwilling to do that for such a long period of time. Plus, also, it's a huge window to operate within that kind of time scale. And often opportunities will come where you can book a shorter term forward contract for your next payment, maybe, without worrying about what the whole thing's going to cost you, unless you particularly want to. I have seen it done, but it's quite rare. Generally, it's just the 2 or 3 month periods that people operate in with a forward contract.
So Tom, should I open an account now and start buying euros in anticipation of my purchase?
So there's two kind of parts to this question. The first one is, I often get asked is, when should I engage with a currency specialist? When should I be speaking to a currency broker? And the answer to that is as early as possible in your process. So we meet a lot of people at our big exhibitions, and I always say to them, it's worth opening your account with us now. You might not be planning on buying for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it might be. But open your account with us now, because until you are speaking to a currency specialist, you don't even know what you can and can't afford to offer on any properties you go and look at. You don't even know what to type into the box on the search engine of what your budget might be, because until you've spoken to someone who can tell you what realistically your pounds equal in euros, or dollars or Australian dollars, whatever it might be, you're not going to be able to do those initial stages without guessing. So engage with the currency company as early as possible. Open up your account, get a dedicated account manager, as we offer, assigned to you. Then they're not going to pester you. They're not going to chase you down and try and hurry you in the process. They're just going to be able to keep you informed on what's happening and critically answer any questions you might have. But the only question you'll probably have at that early stage is, what's my budget? What can I afford to buy? I've got XYZ amount of pounds. So engage with the currency broker as soon as you can. But no, I wouldn't start buying your euros or dollars or whatever it might be in advance, because going back to what we said earlier, I wouldn't buy any currency until you're committed to a transaction, you put an offer in, it's been accepted, you're paying reservation fees.
But Tom, if someone's coming out for an inspection trip and they know that the estate agent is going to ask them for €6,000, a lot of clients will come into us and say, look, I've put that on my credit card, and they get awful rates. So it's not a bad idea, really, is it? I mean, to say, set up an account and maybe have that €6,000 ready in your pocket for when you come out.
You could do, yeah, and there are clients who do that for that exact reason. Sometimes it's quick. But the only thing I would say is, in the world that we live in with mobile banking and online banking, if you ring me up at 4 o'clock one afternoon and say, Tom, found the dream property, put the offer in, need to make the reservation fee, as long as you're registered, as long as you've got your account manager in place, and as long as you've got your mobile phone on you so you can transfer as money, I can turn around that spot transaction within an hour anyway. So therefore, actually, it kind of removes the need for that. We can send out receipts, payment receipts, receipts that lawyers such as yourself and agents are very happy to say, right, look, we can see the money's on the way, even if it hasn't cleared yet, so we'll take the property off the market. So yes, it's absolutely fine to buy that 6,000, 5,000 euros in advance. and we can have it ready to go. But you're still going to be calling us to tell us to send it. So actually, the addition of the let's do the trade and then get it sent is very little time, and it can be spun around very quickly. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And then if, for example, your circumstance change, then you could, I suppose, you'd only have a much smaller amount of euros left to deal with. But yeah, either way. But maybe I'm a bit extra cautious. The currency markets are quite a volatile thing, so I always err on the side of caution when advising clients on things like that. So.
Absolutely. I think the key is that what we have active clients who bought properties off plan, or there's been a delayed completion of 3, 4, 6 months, whatever, while they get their finances in place, or they sell a property, and if they can buy the euros, I would always recommend them to buy euros, because you can put your euros in your bank account on that day and know that you're going to be able to afford the property. Heaven forbid if the euro went up in value and all of a sudden it's going to cost you extra, and that does happen as well. So
Yeah.
I think the key to all of this is keeping in touch with your currency broker and then taking advice from them.
Absolutely right. Yeah, the thing, as I say, early doors, the best thing you can do is engage with us as early as possible, but then as much as possible as well. Ultimately, there are so many intricacies to buying property overseas relating to the finances of it. As you say, unexpected delays can just pop out the woodwork, left, right, and centre. You know very well yourself. You do some searches on a property, and something pops up that causes it to be delayed for a little bit longer, or whatever it might be. So yeah, engagement and communication are obviously the key things.
I agree. So we always encourage that to our buyers as well. Talk to us up front before they even come out to Spain.
Yeah,
So they should add that, as well as speaking to a mortgage broker if they require a mortgage. Okay.
absolutely.
So we talked roughly about, briefly about someone buying a property off plan. Now we've got clients. I've got a client basically signed a contract today. Completion is going to be September 2026. Right. So what would he's got to pay 10% now and nothing until 2026. What would you recommend?
So clearly, you do a spot transaction, straightforward for the 10%, get that done and dusted. And then the first thing, and I guess the key thing, is to understand what their circumstance is. If we're looking to book a forward contract potentially, which, as I said earlier, I would often recommend, and going out for a little over a year, that's fairly common in these kind of contracts. So that's a good strategy. But first of all, you need to find out their circumstances. Do they have the 10% available? Might be quite a sizable amount of money. Have they got it tied up somewhere else? Whatever investments they might have in place, is it actually cost effective to take that 10% out? If they do, and they're ready to go, and they're keen, and they understand the benefits to booking ahead, then a forward contract is obviously probably going to be a good idea in that situation. Particularly, and I think the elephant in the room as well, is, as much as people might listen to what we're saying a month down the line or 2 months down the line. The markets and the global outlook that we have at the moment is quite a tense situation, and there is a lot of volatility in the market. So booking things like forward contracts is an especially good idea at the moment, because we can wake up on an almost daily basis and discover Donald Trump's done something that will move the currency markets even more, or in the wrong way again. So yeah, forward contracts definitely a good idea in that scenario. But understanding the client's circumstances, because it isn't perfect for everyone. If someone doesn't have access to that 10% straight away, then that's fine. We can always speak to them. They might be drawing down some of those funds in 2 or 3 months' time. They've got 13 months, 14 months to go until this completion. So during that 14-month period, you could book a forward contract at any time, when the 10% is available, or when the market's in a better place, or when it's more applicable to their situation. So there are plenty of, in a lot of those long-term situations, there are plenty of options, and making sure that you get the right one for the client is the most important thing. But typically, a forward contract is still the answer and the way to go.
Okay, that sounds good. Interesting. Okay, so we've talked about clients buying property and forward contracts, spot contracts, etc. What about if they're selling? Because most clients, when they sell a property in Spain, will either receive a banker's draft, a check, or they will receive, the lawyer might receive a transfer. What kind of services can a place in Sun Currency offer for those clients?
Okay, so those are, as you say, the two typical ways of those transactions completing, and we can help you with either. So in the case of a banker's draft, obviously it's a slightly, for us here in the UK, that's a slightly antiquated system that we haven't seen around for quite a few years now. But it is still fairly commonplace in Spain. And the problem with banker's drafts is they come with lots of charges. And also a lot of people who are closing out property transactions are doing so because they might be selling up and coming back to the UK or moving on somewhere else. So they won't necessarily have their own bank accounts still open in place and things on those lines. So we offer a service whereby we can, our staff on the ground can collect the draft from the lawyer on the day of completion, and then they can pay it into our client's account in Spain with Sabadell Bank locally as well there in Spain. And then we can handle FX transaction 2 or 3 days later once the check clears. And then the return of the funds to the UK if that's what they're doing, or to elsewhere in the world if they're not a UK resident or person, or whatever the right expression might be. So we can help with the draft, and similarly with an actual transfer of funds. We can handle that just as easily as well. When you complete on a property purchase with yourself, for example, we can then give you our client account details, and you can arrange for that transfer to be sent onto our client account in the client's name, and then we can do the currency exchange and transfer the sterling proceeds, or whichever currency it might be, onto their bank account from there. It's worth pointing out that we have a much better arrangement with Sabadell than an individual client might have. But even through our service, there are still quite a lot of charges attached to drafts. So the exchange rates that we can offer for drafts are still much better than you would get if you transacted locally through your bank or through any other kind of mechanism to do it, but are slightly wider than you might find on a normal bank transfer transaction, just to cover off those charges that the banks in Spain will still charge. But ultimately, we're still expecting to save clients at least 3 or 4%, because the Spanish banks are also not very good on the FX in the same way the UK ones are. So the savings are still there. It's just a slightly different parameter for the exchange rate. But yeah, and those transactions are just as easy. People often view them as maybe slightly more complicated, or it's money's over in Spain, how am I going to get it back? But actually, it's just as straightforward as the other way around, and often maybe even slightly easier, because in most cases, a lawyer such as yourself is going to be involved in the transaction. So a lot of the nitty and gritty of the transfer of the funds, or the preparation of the draft and handling of the draft, can be handled by yourselves and then our representatives on the ground as well.
Okay, so there's options there for clients, whether they receive their sales proceeds by bank transfer or in a check. That's great.
Absolutely.
Okay, Tom. Well, thanks ever so much for everything you've said so far. What about some final tips for our buyers and sellers out there?
So I think the biggest one is actually, I think we've covered a lot off on the actual currency exchange side. But I mentioned earlier, one of the most important things is actually the payment side. And it's really, really critical in a post-Brexit world that we live in now, that people understand that money moving from the UK specifically into Europe is not as straightforward as it might appear on the tin. So if you go onto your online banking, for example, you can do an international payment. You can put in the IBAN number, you can put in the SWIFT code, whatever it might be. But there are many, many pitfalls that don't appear in front of you when you're doing that process. The first one relates specifically to a handful of countries within Europe. One is Spain, another is Cyprus, and a couple of others, maybe some of the banks in Italy as well, where the local banks are very keen to make charges on transfers coming from the UK. So if you send funds from the UK directly into one of those banks, then you will get charged by the local bank what's called a receiving fee. and they're not strictly speaking supposed to do it, but the local regulators aren't particularly on the side of the UK consumers, so they get away with it. And so using someone who can help stop that from happening could save you as much as 0.5% on the transaction. So to put that, to go back to the kind of examples we used earlier, you know, if you send over 100,000 euros, you could lose as much as 500 euros just from a local banking charge there. So the way we combat that is we have a suite of banking, all of our banking's with Barclays Bank, and we have a suite of banking with Barclays in Germany, as well as our local banking in Spain with Sabadell. And we route all funds that we send for UK clients into Spain, Italy, Cyprus through our German accounts, so that when they arrive with the local bank, they're a intra-EU transfer. So they haven't come from the UK, they've come from Germany. So therefore it eliminates the chance that they're going to levy those charges. The second aspect of that is those very same banks will also charge you if you send the wrong amount of money to them. And just to put that into context, the European Council's SEPA regulations designate you shouldn't send more than 50,000 euros in one transaction unless you're open to the idea of being hit with charges. Now, some of the banks in Spain have actually unilaterally lowered that amount to a smaller amount. So, for example, you send money to La Caixa in Spain, you shouldn't send it in more than 20,000 euro tranches. If you send it to Bankia, it's 25,000 euros. If you send it to Sabadell, Santander, Bank Inter, then it is the 50,000 euros. But so if you're sending 300,000 euros for a nice big property completion and you send it in one go, then you'll again get hit by more receiving charges just for sending it, even if you send it from Germany.
Wow.
So what we do in that case as well is we split the transactions down into the relevant tranches for those local receiving banks. So our absolute dream client is obviously someone who's got a larger transaction to do, but if they're sending money to La Caixa, then it always comes as a bit of a poison chalice, because we've got to break down their transfers into sub 20,000 euro transactions.
Wow.
So a client who's buying a massive property in Marbella or the Costa del Sol more generally for 700,000 euros, we'll end up sending potentially as many as kind of 35 to 40 tranches of funds for them. We don't charge any extra for that service. We do all the splitting down, and the funds will still all arrive on the same day with all the right references on and everything. But it's essential you do that because, again, you could cost, if you sent the funds directly from the UK and didn't do any of that breaking down, it could get as much as 1% more of the funds could be lost to those charges. So making sure you really understand how you're going to do those international payments is critical. That's why the advantage of using a broker such as ourselves is so critical. And that is over. Remember, those online currency portals, they won't do any of that for you. Some of them do actually offer their banking locally in Europe, so you'll save some of that. One of the big names that I won't bother mentioning, but they do their banking out of Belgium. So ultimately, you'd still save half of that. But it's down to you to split it down if you want to split it down into tranches rather than them doing it automatically. So again, these are the little things that make it worth engaging with ourselves or a company such as ourselves. And then, maybe a little bit of a personal thing here for our business. The A Place in the Sun brand is obviously the #1 brand for UK buyers looking to buy over anywhere around the world, but specifically in Europe. And I would always recommend engaging with us primarily because you probably fell in love with our brand when you watched the TV show, but also you probably looked for properties on our portal, attended one of our exhibitions, were lucky enough to meet Alex at one of our exhibitions, maybe even lucky enough to meet me at one of the exhibitions as well. But critically, we're the only FX broker that is specifically designed to help people buying property overseas. So there's a whole raft of extra services that we offer that are very much tailor-made to that. And there's just one final thing that we do that we believe separates us from all of our competition. Relates to one of the things that, again, it's a bit of an elephant in the room thing that people don't want to talk about. But in the world that we live in now, fraud, email interception, scams, things along these lines are prevalent in all of our lives. We'll all know someone who's unfortunately been a victim of one of these things. And this industry is no different. There are all manner of fraudsters who attempt to inveigle themselves into these transactions to impersonate someone, put in the wrong bank details into someone's email. And there are multiple reports of these kind of cases that we hear all the time. And so one of the things that we do, there's various kind of checks that we carry out, but one of the most critical ones we do is whenever someone instructs us to make a payment, we have a secure encrypted form that enables them to do that. But whenever someone instructs us, we receive those bank details that they want us to pay. So it might be to a lawyer, a real estate agent, a developer, whoever it might be. And we'll check our database of previously paid companies. If we've paid that beneficiary before, obviously that brings with it a lot of peace of mind. So we'll let the client know that, and we'll make sure that everything's in order and it matches up. If we haven't paid that beneficiary before, then we'll contact them directly and independently ourselves. So we won't just ring the phone number that the client gives us. We'll go and find them online. We'll find them their critical office that they're dealing with locally in the area that they might be buying in. We'll ring them up ourselves, and we'll check those bank details that our client's given us are correct with the beneficiary themselves. And we have encountered multiple cases where they're not, because something's gone wrong somewhere along the line and someone's had a problem. So this is an extra level of service that, as far as I'm aware, no other FX company offers. We are unique in this offering, and it is one of the reasons we have an absolute clean bill of health on this front when it comes to suspected frauds. We unfortunately do have to report these cases when we come across them to the National Crime Agency in the UK, who then obviously feed these things on. But we always make sure the client funds are safe. We always make sure they get to where they should be going, not necessarily where the client thinks they should be going. So that's for me one of the most critical things in the market at the moment, and something that is very unique about us. And obviously our bright orange branding and our office in Cabinway that any client's welcome to come and visit us in. And our big exhibitions, which I would highly recommend. I'm sure you'd agree, Alex, as the first port of call for anyone who's looking to take that step into a property overseas. Invaluable resource, and spread all around the UK, so easy to attend whenever you might need one.
Absolutely, I agree with that. So two final points that you've kind of I was thinking about while you're talking, Tom, is, for example, then what kind of licenses do you have in place?
Okay, so we are, as I mentioned earlier, the FX industry in the UK is heavily regulated. We're regulated by two different regulators and in two different ways. The first one is HMRC themselves. They regulate us for anti-money laundering regulations. So that's all about understanding who sent us the money, where they got that money from, and their ID matches, and we're not sending funds to any sanctions individuals. So they regulate us on that front. And we actually had our second ever visit in about 10 years, I think, from them recently to review all of our documentation, all of the holdings that we have, and all of our policies that we have in place. So they're a hands-on regulator who are very, very critically involved in our industry, and that we're regulating them as what's called a money service business. The second one, and this is the one that people are probably would more expect, is the FCA, formerly the FSA, so the Financial Conduct Authority, and they regulate us as what's called an authorised payments institution. So their regulation is actually more about the payment side than the FX side. So that's all about looking after client funds. So when you've got funds with us, they're held in segregated client accounts, similarly to if the funds are held in one of your clients' accounts, Alex. It's very similar. It's kind of in an escrow trust kind of situation. And they're held separately to our business accounts, so that, if for whatever reason we decide to shut up shop and not operate in this industry anymore, then those funds would be, as I mentioned, Barclays or our principal bankers. They'd be returned to those clients who they belong to because they're held separately to our business funds. So those are the two main regulators. I'd point out, though, as well, people, whenever people do encounter those cases that are widely reported in the press of something going wrong in the financial services industry, it's often the banks that get a lot of the flack. So Barclays, in offering banking to a company like ourselves, obviously are exposing themselves to our service. So they actually act as a kind of de facto third regulator themselves, and they're much more heavily involved. Obviously, every transaction that we send, they see. So on a daily basis, we get calls from Barclays to verify details on transactions and to verify that everything's being done in accordance with all of our policies that they also have visibility of. So the two main regulators are the official regulators, but actually Barclays and their reputation being attached to our business is almost just as important as that, and they do a lot of the checking themselves. And now, obviously, we also, as I mentioned, we operate banking in Spain as well, and as part of that, we have local regulation with the Bank of Spain there as well, which is equivalent to the FCA. So they monitor the same kind of things. So we have client accounts with Sabadell as well. So the two main UK regulators are the ones that the UK clients are primarily going to know, but rest assured we're also regulated in Spain too, and also Barclays are making sure we do everything right as well.
Well, so you've got a hell of a lot of regulation there, Tom.
Yeah,
Gosh,
we have a whole team that are specifically involved in making sure that all of those regulations are kept to, that we have all the information in place, but obviously that we're speaking to those regulators regularly as well.
That's good. Excellent. Well, listen, thank you ever so much for your very comprehensive knowledge and sharing some of your tips with us today. I hope our listeners found that useful, and no doubt they'll be in touch with a place in the Sun currency if they need to transfer monies to and from Spain or from their home country. Thank you ever so much, Tom.
No problem at all, Alex. And yeah, we look forward to helping all of those clients in the future. Take care.
Take care. See you soon.
Cheers.